a lot of people would look, oh, wow, you went from Bethel to transformation. And that's really cool because you get to do that. And it's like, yes, but also I went from something super established to bare bones, nothing, you know? So I'm here and I'm trying to build a team now. I'm trying to build this. And so but that's part of, I think, the whole addicted to stress, right? Where I'm trying to build this team here. I'm trying to get things going, but it's amazing to really see.
Come into the light.
Congratulations! World's best cup of coffee.
What is it? Gaff tape. Well, hey there, I'm Nate Anderson from Resi, and I'm here with Daniel Larson.
Hey, guys.
And welcome to Coffee and Gaff Tape. It's a podcast created for people mashing the buttons, calling the keys, and running the cables while wearing mostly black and surrounded by total darkness. It's called being on the production team.
That's right.
And if you have the honor of being on such a team, the name of this show will come as no surprise to you. We know copious amounts of coffee and gaff tape are the two essential tools of anyone trying to make it through production day. We have a very special launch episode in store for you, so I won't bore you with pointless chit-chat. However, make sure you hit subscribe and share this show with your friends, your coworkers, and your volunteers. We know most likely they're all one and the same. We have some big things planned for this show, and we wouldn't want you to miss out.
All right, with that out of the way, talk about pointless chit-chat, man.
Yeah, right?
I have the privilege to introduce our main segment of the show. It's called The Interview.
Very creative.
We know major points for creativity, but that's what we're calling it because that's what it is. Each and every episode, we're going to sit down with someone that wears mostly black, loves new gear day as much as you do, and definitely knows how to over-under a cable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's super important. We're going to talk tech booth life and real life, all while trying not to take ourselves too seriously.
Awesome. And as you heard in the show teaser, our guest today is the one and only Chad Vegas.
Whoop, whoop.
He's the former video director at Bethel Church in Redding, California, and now he's the video director at Transformation Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're super excited to talk about his life, talk about his new gig, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of good things to share. So
TC Nation.
sit back, turn up those AirPods, and we'll get right into it.
All right, we are here with Chad Vegas. Chad, thank you so much for being here, all the way from Transformation Church.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We are so honored to have you here. And we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different stuff. But first, we definitely want to ask you, who is Chad Vegas?
Oh, man. Chad Vegas. I'm a father. I'm a husband. Just an all-around geek, basically, that just happened to fall into the broadcast world and broadcast industry for churches. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride. I never thought in my entire life that I would end up doing this. I started out my life as a drummer, started at 7 years old. My dad put drumsticks in my hand and said, I want my son to be a drummer. And so I started out as a drummer and worked my way into just playing drums, worship leading and things like that. And one day they needed a editor at my church back in Las Vegas. And just so happened to fall in love with it. And gosh, man, the rest, as they say, is history. Is pretty much after a couple of years, I ended up going to Bethel, and that's where I actually really started live directing. I was doing a little bit back in my church in Vegas, but by the time I made it to Bethel, I started as a camera op and then started to direct. And then from there, I ended up taking over the department there for the live video department. And then God called us here to Tulsa, Oklahoma a couple of years later. So it's been a crazy ride.
Dude, that's so crazy. That's so crazy. All right, so I'm just going to ask, this is a personal question, just for me, because I've wondered my whole entire life.
Yeah.
Is your last name really Vegas?
It is. Yeah. Originally from Hawaii.
That's amazing. But then you said you went to a church in Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas. Yeah.
That's so cool.
I was born and raised in Hawaii. And then when I was, how old was I? Junior year, 16. So when I was 16, we actually moved up to Las Vegas because just economy was way better.
Sure.
I mean, at the time, I think gas was like 90 cents when we moved.
Oh, wow. Back in the day.
In 1998 or something like that. So
Jeez.
We're like, oh my gosh, it's just a better way of life. And Vegas they call it, a lot of the Hawaiian people call it the ninth island. Because there's 8 major islands in Hawaii, and then Las Vegas is the 9th island because so many people from Hawaii ended up moving there.
Really?
But yeah. So it was definitely interesting. Like even sometimes when I go back for work over there, like I'll check into the hotel and I'll like, yeah, last name Vegas. And they look at me and they laugh like, no, that's really my name.
I
pull out my
promise.
ID. It's me. I promise. Yeah, it's
I'll
good.
give you a discount or something.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. So cool. Oh man, I feel like we could just close the interview out now with that nugget. I'm good now. I'm good. No, okay. So you talked about kind of how you got into broadcast. What was that kind of like first experience like of you sitting behind, a board and calling the shots?
Yeah. Oddly enough, it was my first time really directing was actually Reuben Morgan came to our church in Vegas, and the director at the time he couldn't make it, and they're like, you're our only hope. Like, I don't know really what I'm doing. And so yeah, I started to cut and do things, and I was like, oh wow, I could actually really help tell a story. Like, I've never been in a spot where, like, yes, editing, you can kind of tell the story, but then a lot of times you have that producer behind you saying, hey, this is what we kind of want it to look like. And then you also have the director, things like that. So having that choice where I can actually shape the story and kind of help like push, for lack of a better way of saying it, push the narrative, like, hey, this is what we want it to feel like and look like, just really started exciting me. And I did it for a little bit there. But I really, because basically what happened, just a long story short, is I was an editor there, and then I ended up getting hired by a major production house in Vegas, and we would do basically all the commercials and like entertainment magazine shows for all the casinos in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where I kind of honed my editing skills and motion graphic skills. And when I went back to the church, they actually hired me back as the media director. So there wasn't really much. It was more like pushing paper and making sure the team was all good and stuff. So I didn't really direct. And so coming back to when we moved up to Bethel, I just started out as a camera op and, worked my way up. I really didn't hone any of my really directing skills until I started doing stuff at Bethel. My boss at the time, Anthony West, was just an amazing director as far as shaping the story and pushing that narrative. Like, hey, we want people to really feel what it's like at Bethel, really feel what it's like inside of the room. And it was really great because I got to hone my skills from him. That actually got. He was the one of the main camera operators for BTV or ITV and Sky Network and BBC back in the day. So he had a lot of knowledge as far as directing and shaping stuff. And so, yeah, it was really cool to actually sit under him and for him to one day say, hey, I'm going to go down to Jesus Culture to help them out now. And here, it's all yours. It was definitely one of those like surreal, like, oh no, now I got to actually work. but it was really cool. But yeah, I think, something there's something that I love to say is that I get to build my dreams on the sacrifices of others sometimes.
Yeah.
And that, what that is like, the only reason why I'm here is because Pastor Mike Todd here sacrificed something, a part of his life.
Yeah.
And because he sacrificed, I get to live out my dream. So it was the same thing with my boss, Anthony West. His sacrifice of actually taking his whole family over to Sacramento and helping out Jesus Culture is the way that I was able to get propelled to live out my dream of directing and then, doing things like this, talking to you guys, so.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you mentioned TC and ending up at Transformation. I don't know why, but when I heard that you were making the move, I pictured like an NFL team, like making a trade to another NFL team. But walk us through how that happened and your journey thus far to Oklahoma.
Yeah. It was very interesting. So because COVID started to happen, I ended up doing like a mentorship program, and also everybody just started contacting Bethel and contacting us and say, hey, how do we stream? What are you guys using? How do we do this? What can we do on a low budget? What can we do on a higher end budget? Just we had the whole, range of people. And I was getting so many direct messages, and a lot of them, it was really hard just to text back like, hey, you can do this. And, I had the pre-canned responses, right? And so I said, you know what? It's probably easier if we just chat. I'll take some time out of my day and, let's set up Zoom calls. And so we started doing Zoom calls and talking to different churches. And just so happened that one of the churches that was asking for some ideas on directing and direction and finding a director, they was a Transformation Church. The new production director there, Jeremy Van Valkenburg. That's a handful.
Dude, I love following him on Instagram. I'm just saying, he is.
Yeah, he's great.
He's a real gem.
Yeah, he is. Totally love that guy. We had a Zoom call basically, and I'd never ever heard of Transformation Church or Mike Todd. And when he reached out to me, I sent it over to my assistant. I'm like, hey, yeah, here's another one. Just set them up at some point. And usually she pushes them like 2 to 3 weeks out. And he was like 3 days later, he was on my calendar. And I'm laughing. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. Maybe that was the only time he could do it. So we get on a call and he starts sharing his heart and what God has been doing here at Transformation Church. And I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. And he's like, I know that, I'm obviously not asking you for a job, but do you know anybody that could kind of do what you do here? And I said, I kind of know some people. And, we basically ended on like, hey, let's just, still be in communication. I'll let hit you up with some people that I think would be a good fit for you guys. And he's like, yeah, okay, cool. Cut to a week later, their director that was supposed to be directing for the recordings for them couldn't make it. So they're like, hey, could you fly up here? This is like on a Wednesday. And they're like on a third, could you fly up here tomorrow? Basically, it was a Wednesday. And could you fly up here tomorrow? And if we flew you up, could you direct for us? And I'm like, sure. Yeah, let's try it, And so I came out not even looking for anything and just hey, I just want to be a help, and got into the car, drove to the church, and once I entered the church, it just felt like home. Like for my wife and I, we don't really look to anything like, I will say this. Yes, the cost of living is better than California, all that stuff, the practical end stuff. We don't really look to that as much as, does it feel like this is where God is moving us to? And does it feel like this is where we're supposed to be? All that to say, like, Bethel was great. I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't put like resumes out or anything like that. It was really totally like a God thing where he's like, Chad, this is the next spot for you. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not bad. It's not. Don't you see what I'm doing at Bethel? This is where it's supposed to be, and it felt like it checking my heart. I think the first hour or 2 hours there, I'm walking around the arena and I'm like, this could be something really cool. Like this could be, and in my mind at the time, I was actually like, man, the person that comes here, they're going to be able to do a lot, and it's going to be really cool to see what can be done. I'd say about maybe 2 hours into me being there, setting up some stuff, and God just totally just rocked my world. And he's just like, no, this is you. This is you. Yeah. One thing led to another, and I'm here.
So how'd your wife handle the news when you said, we're moving to Oklahoma? We want to,
that for me, that was the, that for me was the actual, like, really like final nail in the coffin, as they would say.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I said, hey, what do you feel about moving? How do you feel about moving to Tulsa? And she's like, it's funny because I was looking around our house, and at the time our house in California was sort of like our dream house there. Like that's what we were looking at and wanted, and we got it. And we were looking around, and she's like, I felt like this house was too small already and that we would be going to someplace else. But she thought it was in Redding. But when I mentioned Oklahoma, she's like, I think it might be Oklahoma. Yeah. And I brought her up for one of the recordings that we did, and I brought her up with me, and it was totally like, people spoke into our lives that we'd have favor with like real estate and things like that. And it sort of happened in Reading, but it wasn't, I didn't feel like fulfilled by that word. Like, there's still something out there, like there's still something more. And when we were here, within 2 hours, we found a house that was like the perfect house.
Wow.
Amazing.
And after that, we ended up sitting down with Pastor Mike and talking with him for a little bit. And my wife turned to me after, she goes, "This is where we're supposed to be. Let's go make an offer on the house."
It's awesome.
Holy cow.
By that evening, we made an offer and the offer got accepted to the house. So it was one of those things like, okay,
I guess we're doing this.
Yeah, I guess we're doing it. Yeah. And then month later, we were in this house and moved in. So,
wow.
Yeah, God's doing something here that I don't think I've ever really seen. Really, I mean, it's not just because of the growth of the church. I mean, they went from 2014 to now, to 2019, to having, or 2020, sorry, to having 400 people to 5,000 people.
Yeah.
On average, our watch time online now is we get about 30,000 watching live. In some cases we'll actually hit 130,000 people watching live with an average watch time of 30 minutes.
Holy cow.
It's crazy. Like we look at ourselves and like, are we really doing it? Like, is this happening? Like, what is going on? To put some numbers behind it, but really when it comes down to the end of the day, it's really just like God's doing something here. And for me to be a part of it, I think is something special that I feel like, man, Lord, you brought me to this place so that not only can I experience this, but also it's someplace where I get to build something. I think it's really cool because I'm starting here from the ground level, like everything that I had, which is funny too. It's like, a lot of people would like, oh, wow, you went from Bethel to transformation. And that's really cool because you get to do that. And it's like, yes, but also I went from something super established to bare bones, nothing, So I'm here and I'm trying to build a team now. I'm trying to build this. And so that's part of, I think, the whole addicted to stress, right? Where I'm trying to build this team here. I'm trying to get things going, but it's amazing to really see what God's doing behind the scenes. And we say it a lot here, prayer is our sauce. Like that is the thing. Like everything that we do starts with prayer. Like it's really cool to have like even the smallest meeting, like, hey, we're meeting for 5 minutes. Let's pray real quick. Like the smallest thing. And it's always keeping connected. I like to talk about a lot of times when you're looking at prayer, it's like a lot of people think that you got to go and you got to pray hard or pray for like an hour. And yes, that's good. And there's times for that. But really, it's about staying connected. When I'm gone from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. doing something for work, I don't see my wife. I don't see her at all, but I'm staying connected by texting her and talking to her. So I'm constantly keeping my relationship with her, and it's the same way I look at prayer. It's like I'm constantly talking to God, constantly, it doesn't have to always be that, hey, I'm going to get, if I don't pray for 2 hours and don't cry, it's not going to be a good prayer, So, but it's really cool to see what God is doing here. And I like, it's one of those for such a time as this moment that it's like, man, okay, Lord, this is cool. Like I'm
very cool.
That's so cool.
Sorry for rambling there.
No, it's great. Dude, that's fine. You actually touched on something that I wanted to ask you about for sure was, you had mentioned Bethel being so established and you being a large part of that, kind of bringing Bethel's look and feel and, style to where it was. And so many people looked up to that. What was it like leaving that in the hands of someone else? And then, kind of like being like, okay, like that's, that's yours now. In a way, almost like your mentor did for you.
Yeah.
Right. What was that process like for you personally?
It was I think it was smoother than most churches or most people would have it. Mainly because it was really the person that I gave it to, Jesse Maitland. He and I and Drake Kelch were the three people that basically rebooted the whole style of cinematic worship at Bethel and things like that. And, we went to more handheld versus on sticks or the jib a lot, and just really incorporating certain things. And all of our ideas were shared ideas. Like we would get together. Hey, how do we want this to look like? Oh yeah, let's try this. Let's do this. What if we move the camera here instead of there? All that kind of things was the three of us really. And so I really felt like when looking at the entire team and everything, I said the only person that I'd ever want to give this to would be Jesse. And it was a lot smoother than most people would think, just because he knew already like how I think, because we spent so much time together. I think it would have been tough if it was one of those things where, hey, I'm gonna come in and totally revamp the entire deal, right? Getting somebody else from it, and which is great too. I'm not putting that down as well, but I think having somebody that still had that same cinematic style that you want, that you start, help kind of cultivate, is always something good. And granted, yes, every director has a different style. So he is definitely taking it and making it his own and directing, there is stuff that he does that I wouldn't even thought of. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't think about that, like, oh, that's great. So yeah, it's really cool to see, I'll still tune in every couple of Sundays when I can and look at the team and hear them and watch the multi-views. I'm really happy that they still stream the multi-views so I can feel like I'm still a part. I told them like, yeah, I went from being there. Now I'm just like the biggest fanboy ever that talks about Bethel and being at Bethel. So yeah,
they don't still give you comm access and you can talk to
yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
I can just hear the conversations in your brain. Oh wait, no, switch, no, wait, camera.
yeah.
One question I wanted to ask too, just even you spoke about kind of the vision of the style. Obviously, people look up to Bethel as a specific style, and you guys have been very instrumental in driving that cinematic style. What's kind of the strategy that leads to that for you, where you determine this is the style that we're going for, whether that's an ENG style or more of a cinematic style?
Yeah. For us at the time, we really wanted, I think Bethel was doing a really good job of having what's happening in the room, basically broadcast it out and having that feel happen inside of your own home. Right. But I felt like there was more, like we could do more. We could, especially like on the faster songs, traditional broadcast, they'll kind of stick to a rhythm all the time. Like it'll stay on the faster songs. It kind of still stays in this rhythm. They're crossfading. They're every once in a while they'll switch to a different camera, that kind of a deal. And I wanted it to really feel more engaging. Like I wanted it to feel like I'm going to be fully like, I want to watch this, like, but at the same time, which is funny because I talk like that. Like, yeah, I want them to feel like I want to watch this, but at the same time, if I'm doing my job right, they're going to be at home with their eyes closed and hands lifted, right?
Sure. That's good.
But I want them to really feel engaged. And so we really felt like, well, how do we do that? And like, well, we're already doing something, a technique that we use called cinema verte on sticks. So on the tripod or pedestals, where there's always movement on the cameras. Mm-hmm. And then we wanted like, well, let's add more handheld. Let's practice, something we call the walk, where they're walking, kind of turning your body into like a human gimbal. And it's all in the way you hold the camera, the way you walk. And so that it can stay smooth, but you can still walk around and it's still more handheld feeling. And it is really handheld. So it's still feeling that way across the lens, right? Across the screen. And so doing that, we really found that it really helped like really engage and push people to really like, oh, okay, I want to see what's happening. I want to see what's going on. And not only that, I think on the back end, it was something where we started to create a culture of honor with your camera operators. A lot of times in traditional broadcasts, the director is very stern, very like, oh, get this shot. What's wrong with you? And unfortunately, sometimes it crosses over into the Christian industry just because the people that are professionals that can do the job the best end up getting saved, but they get hired at churches, but they're still going off of what they know. And it's nothing against them. It's just that this is just what they know. And a lot of times it just seeps over. And I remember being on camera once somewhere, and I'm doing a shot, and I'm worshiping. For me, it's like it's the same way when I direct. When I'm on camera, that's my act of worship. That's my form of worship. And so I'm worshiping and getting shots, and the director takes my shot, and then all of a sudden I hear, "Ugh," and immediately now it takes me out of my worship, and now I'm trying to impress my boss. I'm trying to get shots of impressing him, and it was in that moment when I sat down, and I just felt so defeated that day. And God told me, he goes, "No, there's nobody to impress. I'm already impressed with you."
Wow.
And because of that, it really shifted something in my mind. I'm like, man, if I ever get to direct again one day, I don't want to be that person where I'm on the other side of them and being, come on, what's wrong with you? Yes, there's mistakes. It's a live environment, so there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be things that happen. But at the same time, if one of them does make a mistake, I'm just going to laugh at it and move on, And if it's something that's constantly happening, then it's like a sit down and say, "Hey, what's going on? You're not being yourself, man. How can I help you?" But in the actual moment in worship, I want them to focus on, like my saying is, worship first, capture second. And so in that moment, I want them to worship first. And the only way that I found for that to work is by constantly encouraging them, constantly, if you go back on the Bethel multi-views, when I was there, you'll hear me laugh a lot. You'll hear me tell jokes a lot, just to kind of break the ice, get them to kind of like relax. And once they relax, and they're now really being creative, because they get to, oh, okay, my mind's open, I'm relaxed, I get to take shots like this, I get to do things like that, and I get to try things without Chad having to yell at me, that kind of a feeling. So that's really, honestly, it's like, yes, there was partly on the front end where we wanted it to be a little more engaging, but honestly, for my heart, it was really on the back end. It was really on, I just want to have a team that is totally fine with failing, and they're not going to, I'm not going to come down on them if they make a mistake. That honestly, that totally changed the game for us, like a lot of us. And it's funny because, like, I even coming into something where it was sort of established here, like transformation, helping bring in that kind of just really just open things up. And some of the volunteers that were here are really starting to come back around now and be like, wow, we really want to be a part of this, just because it's really, it's creating that family environment where it's like, hey, it's totally fine. Like, you guys are okay, and we're going to do this, and don't worry about making a mistake. Yes, I don't strive for perfection. I do want to do things excellent, because for me, I love the saying, excellence is kingdom, religion is perfection. Perfection is religion. And so it's like, I don't mind going after excellence, but I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not trying to do things in such a way where I'm going to come down on you hard if you don't, you don't perform, or, that things like that. So, yeah.
Jeez, that's so good. There's so much wisdom in that. So one of the things that I know a lot of the people that are going to be watching this are going to want to know is what's the setup like at TC? And I know that you're coming in kind of at the ground level, which is awesome. And you're kind of being able to kind of like put your fingerprint on, what that whole kind of like infrastructure looks like. So what's the setup like, and what are you hoping to change?
Yeah. Well, right now it's kind of a crazy thing, because I don't think I can actually share the number, but we're putting a lot of money into it's almost the thing that's like, for a lot of churches, it was, and COVID happened, and like it's part of like the worst thing for us. For TC, it's COVID happened, and this is the best thing for us, because they basically moved into arena, but didn't have the time to remodel, didn't have the time to get things, basically made as make it look like more of a church, all that kind of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that's what's happening. Is there's remodels and all that stuff happening. And then they decide like, hey, we want a state-of-the-art broadcast system to go in. And what does that look like? How do we want to do it? And so right now for what we're doing, just because, we were in the arena and then we literally had to move our entire stage setup out into our lobby because they needed the arena to finish fixing everything, getting the sound walls up and fixing the roof and things like that. The gear we use now is all Blackmagic, Ursa Broadcast, ATEM Constellation, a 2ME panel. We have CCU controls for the broadcast cameras. We also do. I added in 2 more handheld cameras that are here. Those are EVA1s or AVA1s from Panasonic that we utilize, which is great because those are actually the same cameras that we're going to be using for handheld once we get into the system. The new system that's going to be coming up is going to be. Oh yes, we definitely use Resi. That's what we use to stream.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then the new system's definitely going to have Resi. And then we're going to have raw securities. Gosh, it's so big. Raw securities, Panasonic Varicams, E001s, Panasonic S1Hs for crowd shots, 2 jibs, cable cam. All in all, we're looking at a normal Sunday looking like close to 14 cameras every Sunday.
Oh my gosh.
So it's going to be a huge setup. Yeah. So it's one of those things where I look at it and I'm like kind of excited and kind of like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into?
Now you got to decide what to do with all of this. That's amazing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. And like
so like,
saying,
what do you think?
Most of it's going to be volunteer.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like $45 for all that?
Yeah. About $45.
Yeah, it's great.
Close to it.
Yeah, this sounds about
some
right.
extra change there.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Which piece of gear are you most excited for?
Gosh.
And you can say Resi if you want.
Ready. That's the most exciting. No, I'm just kidding. I would say, oh man, it's hard. It's just because there's so many like putting this into it really was. I was sitting with my wife one day and going over the sheet, the gear list, and the purchase order, and I'm like, everything that I've ever wanted to do, I get to do, and I get to have the gear to do it.
Wow.
And so I'm looking at it, and I guess the Ross Furiel dolly would probably be one that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
That and the full over at Defy Products. Shout out to Drew James for hooking us up. We're gonna have their newest Dactyl Pro with a Newton head on it. So that I'm really it's a brushless motor system on the Dactyl now, so it's almost silent, which is great because the one that we used at Bethel, you could kind of hear it spin up a little bit,
sure,
as it's going across the line. So those two, I think it's more the robotic stuff that I'm more excited about looking at and trying out. It's hard, man. I'm telling you, because even like thinking about it now, like even the things that I want to do with raw security, I was talking over with Zach over at Elevation a couple of weeks ago, and this is like the things that they do there. It's pretty much almost the same what I want to do. Just with different graphics and things like that. And so that I'm looking forward to as well. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
What does, obviously with all this new gear coming in and a lot of it being manned by volunteers, what does that kind of like training process look like for you? Do you have a game plan already kind of set up and how to get people up and running on it? Or, what are your plans for that?
Honestly, doing boot camps, like rehearse up until right now we're looking at everything being in. And we're probably going to open up sometime in April. So basically, as soon as it's all in, just getting them all together, rehearsing. Our normal system that I like to do is a shadow system. So they'll basically shadow somebody on a Sunday, find out, how things work, all that stuff. And then that person they were shadowing shadows them and basically just goes into a whole rotation of just shadowing for a little while until we feel comfortable and they feel comfortable. Like, oh, I think I can actually do this. But for now, I think just to get everybody running right away, it's really just hit the ground running. I'm going to try, I want to at least have 2 to 3 nights every week for actually really training and getting them all trained up until we go in. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Cool. Do you have camera ops and other volunteers? Are they present at rehearsals and everything? What does that look like?
Yeah. All rehearsals, they're required to be there so that they can hear the song, see what's going on. I try to, as much as possible, make sure that the songs, the MP3s, are actually in Planning Center so that they can go in and pull the songs, listen to it. They kind of already know their camera position, so they have their own. The way I work is I give them a zone, and within that zone, they're totally free to be as creative as possible. So they already have their camera positions and zones, and so they're constantly listening to the song, trying to think in their mind what they would want to do. And so it's a big thing to have them there for rehearsals, especially.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. This is kind of a throwaway question. No big deal at all. But what has your experience been using Resi?
It's been amazing, really. I will say this: when we were back at Bethel, we were streaming on 2 different platforms, and we were kind of still testing out Resi, and the entire somebody hit something, a breaker went or something, and we lost power to the main streaming computer, and it went down, and so the stream went down, and we lost power also to Resi, but the CCU, not the CCU, but the UPS basically was turned on, and so we were still streaming on Resi, and the stream went down completely for the other side, but for us on Resi, it was still up and running, and nobody even knew. It didn't even bat an eye. Whoever was watching that private stream didn't even know that the power went out. That's how amazing it was for us. And we're like, this is a game changer. This is something that we just, we've been looking for a while. But to have that kind of peace of mind, hey, if anything happens, that there's this, you have time. You have time to kind of get it back up and running, and then it'll kick in. And really on the front end, not a lot of people's going to know at all. But yeah, we've been loving using Resi. I love the fact that the producer, the experienced director, even our Pastor Mike, our senior pastor, it's helped them really feel more calm and feel more okay, they can breathe because they know that this, technically the stream won't go down. Yes, there's always room for error, but for the most part, they can okay, I don't have to worry about that, And it's the same thing for me as a director is the stream can start. All right, we're going into the room, and I don't have to worry about, oh no, the stream's going to go down, or, if there's something, if the power goes out somewhere, and the router goes down for a second and they reboot it. And then, a minute later it's back up. Our stream is still live. It's still going, now you can really just upload videos, get it, scheduled out, and just almost just have it almost plug and play. Just pop it in, set your time, and it'll go. It'll stop. All that stuff. That stuff that a lot of times, even now, yes, we're quote unquote mega church here at TC, but since we're still building the team, we don't have a lot of people that can actually get in there. And man a CG computer and hit play and all that stuff, right now. So being able to utilize that in Resi has just been really good.
One question I had for you too, Chad, just in regards to, we're talking about gear, we're talking about planning for new purchases and everything that you guys are doing. A lot of churches look at other big churches and say, this is awesome, this is great, aspirational for us, but we're never going to be there. And, one thing I always say is all churches have the same issues, just some have more zeros. and And so,
Right.
what would you even say to a church that's just getting started, or has kind of nothing right now, in their next steps to be excellent in what they're doing with video?
Yeah, I think next steps is one, utilize what you got. If you have an iPhone and that's all you got and you don't have the budget to go out and get another camera, utilize that. Start with that. At least you're doing something. But the two main focuses is really lighting and audio. I would lighting audio infrastructure, I should say. So lighting, get your lighting down so that it looks good for the camera. Even if for an iPhone or an Android phone, you can still make lighting look good for that. Look up YouTube, 3-point lighting, all those things. It doesn't have to be like fancy. You don't have to get super fancy lights, expensive lights. A lot of times, there were times when I've been at churches where they were using just fluorescent lights that were gelled, just super simple stuff. And then audio, make sure your audio is good. A lot of times people will tune into something online and video can be choppy or a little stuttery, or even, pixelation can occur, and they'll kind of stay in if there's good audio. But if there's bad audio, but great video, they won't stay. A lot of times they'll leave. So work on getting good audio and putting that input into the iPhone or your Android phone. And then the last thing I would say would be, infrastructure as far as internet. Just make sure you got a good internet connection. Resi definitely helps in that area because, I will say this, look into it, because Resi doesn't just do expensive stuff. They have rack units, yes, but they have, the Ray encoder, which is really amazing, in a small form factor that's very affordable. So look into that, and just get your infrastructure, get a good upload speeds, especially if you're going to want to do 1080p. So yeah, use what you got right now, utilize that, make that look good, and then start dreaming and saying, hey, and I know a lot of people will be like, well, how do I tell my leader or my pastor? It's like, show them examples. Say, hey, this is what I kind of have a vision for. This is what I want it to kind of look like. And this is what it will cost. Now, can we get there? Can we not get there? That's a whole different, a whole different talk. But for the most part, I found that as soon as you share vision with examples of what you want, as a media guy, a lot of times you're going to be like, okay, and that gets the ball rolling on them dreaming as well. Like, oh yeah, this could look really good. We could get more engagement online if we put some money towards video and audio. So yeah, definitely lighting and audio is one of the main keys and infrastructure.
That's awesome.
Brilliant.
Chad, aside from Resi specifically, but just with everything, we've talked a lot about a lot of things today regarding video excellence and why excellence matters and how excellence honors God. Why does it matter to you, and why do you think it should matter to others when they're planning for their video infrastructure, that they don't just use, an iPhone with an internal mic? Why is it important that churches need to focus on excellence in their production?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with, as with anything, video's kind of been in the back burner for a while until COVID really hit, right? But it's been on the back burner just because it's been something like, oh, as long as we have a shot and people can tune in, that's fine. And a lot of times, you'll put emphasis on, man, the worship has to be excellent. You have to put excellence into the worship. Make sure there's no bad chord playing or anything. Don't hit the wrong note, because then it's distracting. Things like that. There's twofold. I think a lot of people think that a lot of camera movement can be distracting, and it's a small audience that kind of feel that way. But I'm on the other end where I feel like if there's not camera movement, if there's not an effort put into it, like it's not, you can't engage. You can't, I can watch a Zoom call and not be engaged, right? But if it's something that's excellent, that's like, oh, there's things happening and there's that I can really engage. And then on the other end too, the aspect of it, like I was talking about before, is that, it also brings out, now you're bringing out the gifts of others within your team. Like there's creative people sitting in your church that wants to do something creative. And if there's not an outlet for that, they're going to either, let their dream die or, find it somewhere else. And sometimes it can be somewhere where they'll end up falling away from God. So having something where you're putting together something, if you don't have a team yet, if you don't have a really emphasis on video yet, I would say to start doing so. Start looking at, because there's people in your church that want to be creative and want to do stuff. And if there's no outlet for them to do it, it's going to be very tough sometimes for that person. And I'm not trying to put Debbie Downer on anybody, but it can happen, all in all, though, I would say that by really focusing on video and audio and putting, quote unquote money towards it and pushing that, it will definitely help not only one engagement, obviously, but I think it really ushers in a new era where people are really starting to, embrace the online movement, embrace what's happening, embrace video. So I think this is it's one of those things. It's like when when the car first came out, I'm sure there were people like, I don't need a car. I got my horses right here. It's the same thing with video. It's like, oh, I don't think we need to be online. We can just do a podcast. But having a video, having something visually for people to see that can actually help usher them into a closer relationship with God. I've seen and heard multiple testimonies of people getting touched, people getting saved just because, for instance, a Transformation alone in 2020, they had over 22,000 people give their lives to Christ online.
Wow.
Because of engaging video, and so a lot of it is really just making sure that it's you want to tell the story of your church. You want to tell the story of what's happening at your church. And to do that good, or to do that well, I should say, you need good video. You need good audio. Yeah. Sorry, guys, I'm rambling.
No, this is
That's
awesome. You actually touched on something that I wanted to ask you about. And, we've asked so many different people, what have been the biggest challenges you've faced during COVID and the, the great pivot for so many organizations moving online and doing video and, trying to figure out, okay, what does this new landscape look like? What was that like for you? Even on a day-to-day basis, I'm assuming you were at Bethel at that time. You walk in on a Monday morning and you're like, okay, what do we do? What was that like for you?
It was very interesting. We knew we had we actually for me, I should say, I really felt that weight. It came down on a Saturday night. Okay, now, yes, everybody, Bethel reaches thousands, all that stuff, and everybody would be watching, but everybody watches, but everybody would be watching this Sunday, right? How do we respond to this? How do we, what does it look like? You can only have certain people in the room. There's, all that stuff. And now everybody will be watching it just because nobody can come to church, right? Mm-hmm. So I definitely felt a little bit of weight on that. And okay, part of me wanted to really, part of my heart really wanted to push towards, we got to get things perfect, right? But that's something that totally what I talk about. It's perfection is not it. It's it's just not, And so I said, well, what's the best that we can do? And at the time, I think we could only have 3 ops, I think. So we had 3 or 4 camera ops at the time. So they came in and said, hey, listen, this is not going to be any different than any other Sunday. Let's go into this and let's just do this in a way that normal. Let's treat this as a normal Sunday. And that's what we did. And we just treated it as a normal Sunday. It did feel odd because you couldn't hear the crowd that. Honestly, the one thing I missed the most is hearing the crowd worship. Mm-hmm. As we're doing a worship set. That's the one thing I really miss the most. So like what do we do? Because we were big at the time too. We were big on crowd shots. So that's what we, So it really kind of helped, really shaped us as far as like, okay, no crowd. How are we going to capture this? What are we going to focus on? There's going to be a lot more instruments, or there's going to be a lot more, vocal shots, head shots type, profile shots, deals like that. But I think for us too, it was that, and then it was also like it kind of catapulted our whole team to really step up, just because because we had a school of ministry at Bethel, we now had to go and stream their entire deals. And so we went from basically streaming maybe 4 times a week to streaming every day, almost every day, like 7 days a week. Sometimes 2 worship sets in 2 different rooms or 2 different locations. And even in that, that for us was really big, where Resi came into play, because we just had, we had encoders basically at all of our campuses, and we were just like, oh, we can do this, we can do that, we can, and it was really like they were coming to, like, BSSM was coming to us like, hey, could we stream here and then start this here? And like, yeah, totally fine. Like, oh wow. They go, yeah, we got this really cool box called Resi, and it's amazing. And so it was easy for us to kind of transition into that, but it was definitely something that where we really had to step up, and I'm so proud of the team and the way they just showed up every day. Like literally every day we'd be there from like 8 a.m. to sometimes 6 p.m., 7 p.m. And just like streaming the entire day, doing worship sets the entire day. So it's been really cool to see just even them, like the growth, like all of I will say this, that people that I had on staff there at the time as camera ops, today they're actually directing now. Just because it was like a really crazy boot camp, right? It was like today they're actually directing, because now they kind of had that experience under their belt where they can actually direct now. So yeah, it's been cool to see just that growth for them.
So I'm going to steal Nate's question because we have this like telepathy thing. I know exactly what he's going to ask. Given the new reality of so much of what we do being online, and video based, what are you most excited about for the future now that so many people, including our audiences, are now ready and willing to consume online? What are you most excited about?
I'm most excited about more interaction, I think, and really diving into that world of how do we interact with an audience online. We can't. It's easy. Like I think one of the amazing thing that Pastor Mike here does is he actually brought the staff together and trained them to follow tally. Yeah. So as soon as the light turns green, they know, hey, that's the camera I'm going to go to next, and then as soon as they hit red, they're looking at that camera, And so wherever the camera cuts to, they're looking right at that person. So really making them feel at home, making them feel as a part of, like, hey, I'm actually there. So really exploring that, even something as simple as that, right? Having your pastor like, hey, follow the tally, like look in here, looking, and not just looking out into it. I think it also helps too, because he's not now, or any of the leadership team here, they're not looking at an empty arena, right? They're just looking at the camera, and they're actually physically looking at an audience member. So that is what I think, even more interaction, just dreams and things that I have of figuring out ways for them to interact with us online live, especially here we do a pre-show and a post-show. So, having them more engaged, giving things out, doing stuff, even something as simple. It doesn't have to be like, if you're thinking about like right now, if you're a smaller church or anything, and you're talking about like, yeah, we don't have the budget to give stuff away. Like, honestly, something as simple as a sticker,
right?
Just create some sort of engagement where they can receive something from you guys for free, so something as small as a sticker, a t-shirt, something that you can actually interact with them and have them feel like they're a part of the church still, even though they're some of them could be thousands of miles away at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they still tune in and want to be a part of the church. So yeah, I think more engagement and much more interaction is something I'm really looking forward to. And I'm really hoping that there's people out there right now that are thinking about different ways of trying new technology to really incorporate that into not just a broadcast industry, but the church industry as well.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. All right. So last question, I try to always ask this when I'm talking to someone. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that, coming into this, you're like, man, like I really want to say this. What would that be for you?
Ooh, I would say that a lot of times it's easy to get into these like interviews or things like this and talk tech a lot. And thank you for letting me even share some of my heart. I think, but for me, my biggest thing is heart. It's like the workflow really is 10% tech, 90% heart.
Yeah.
I really feel like people out there in our industry needs to start working towards being okay with themselves if they make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of times I'd go home and like, man, I should have done this better, or I should have done that better. And I'd kick myself, right? And have the rest of the Sunday be horrible just because I'm like, man, I made a mistake today, but coming to the realization that my identity rests in not what I do, but whose I am.
Yeah.
And because God already loves me, he's not going to love me less because I made a mistake, right? He's not going to love me less if I took the wrong camera or I took black. You're like, oh no, I went to black and then, quickly black, that God's not going to love me any less. And also to the point too, is like, it creeps in sometimes where you're like, man, if I don't do good, Susie or Joe on the other end of the lens, at home, they're not going to get saved or they're not going to have a real encounter with Jesus. It's like, sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves that that's what we feel like we have to do. Like, that's where like that whole moving into perfection kind of thing goes into, right? And it's like, no, it's like, regardless, God still got them. God still loves them. God's gonna get them, they're gonna get saved no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter. I at the end of the day, I really don't matter. Like, God matters first. And that's, that's where it's at. I think so. Really, that would be the only thing. It's just like, focus on whose you are, and God loves you no matter what. And in a live environment, broadcast environment, things happen and they happen. And so you can either choose to laugh it off and be like, you know what, Lord, thanks for giving me this joy.
Yeah.
Yes, it can be stressful, but at the end of the day, it's like, oh man, remember that one time when the stream went down? Or, like there's times when I still talk with the old crew. And there are times when somebody was directing and they took a wheel of a hand truck and they took that live, and it's like at the moment they're like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. But like looking back at it, it's like you just laugh because that's what it's about. It's really about just finding the joy in everything that you do for him and knowing whose you are. And I think once you get to that point, like really, like that's where people can be fully engaged online. I think it's because now at the other end of it, you're not having to perform. You're not having to do anything like that. You're just simply there to worship first and capture second.
Yeah.
So good. So good. All right. Well, that is the end. So Chad, thank you again so much for spending this time with us. It is, again, truly an honor. And we just want you to know specifically, like, we're just so grateful for what you guys at Transformation are doing. So often, people in the shadows, in the dark, wearing black shirts are just not maybe appreciated as they should be. And so our hope is that through this interview, you guys feel valued, loved, and seen. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great rest of the day. All right.
All right. You too.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Well, that was awesome, man. I love the thing I think I love the most about Chad and about hearing him is you see the technical piece behind it, but you also see his heart, and his heart for his what they're doing, and it's purposeful. Like he's pouring out There's the intention behind it. And you can see that, in all of the conversations I think we've ever had with him, it's always been heart first, intentionality first, and kind of gear second.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
It's just, it's so evident. And, you kind of heard it in that last question where he was like, I just want to talk about the heart of it.
Mhm.
Like, it's about the people. It's not about perfection.
Yeah.
Excellence is important.
Yep.
And yet, he kept saying like worship first, capture second.
Yep. I love that.
And I was just like, if I'm going to take away one thing
Yep.
from the conversation, I'm going to remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that applies to so many different areas, whether you're in business, whether you're in education, whether you're in, whether you're doing something on a sports field, definitely in church, like, focus on the heart first.
Yeah.
And then, perform what you're supposed to be doing. And just super, super grateful that we got a chance to talk to him.
Totally. We talk a lot about excellence too, and why that matters. And what did you say? Excellence is kingdom, perfection is religion. For him as a church.
Oh, that's so good.
Where we're going to strive for excellence, and we know we're not going to be perfect. We have to have the grace when we're not. There's a process and there's a road to get there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not excusing mistakes. It's allowing for them, because that's where growth happens. That's where you're able to experiment and try to become the best you can be.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's so cliche, but but it's really awesome, because I feel like that gives, especially the camera ops in this context, so much freedom.
Yeah.
To really just try new things and not worry about the fact that like, oh man, like, Chad's going to be mad at me, or I just totally messed up someone's salvation. Like, I thought that was so key, because, even coming from the church that I was at, I was the video director for a while there. And like, I had those same thoughts, and I was like, oh my gosh, like so-and-so like literally just like did not become a Christian because I, cut to black instead of camera, 3 or whatever. And it's just like, it's just not about that.
No.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching, listening. We really, really do appreciate you. Like we had mentioned in the interview, Chad, people in the shadows, people wearing black shirts, people staring at screens on Sunday mornings or whenever your broadcast is live, a lot of times don't get the appreciation or the credit that maybe they deserve. So we're hoping that you guys feel that from us. Anyways, we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.